This is model 2. It discusses choice of the research title and what is it again? And the research process. Please subscribe and share this presentation. Particularly remember to press the bell-like button to your right so that you can receive subsequent presentation. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the second module. Now we will discuss choice of research title. Research titles are very important part of the body of the research itself. So it must be chosen very carefully. So the choice of your research title is based on some theoretical, special and intellectually curious considerations, practical considerations, and I would like to highlight a number of them for the benefit of all of us. Your research title must be short, usually between 10 and 20 words, usually. Must be carefully worded. You must be careful about the choice of your words. Then it must be catchy, that must attract the interest of anybody that reads it and should tell a story. The title is a complete sentence on itself that tells a story. Now, it must also be based on your area of local or an area of local or international interest, because people must be interested either locally or internationally. Otherwise, nobody reads your work. So we must make sure that it must generate local interest or based on some local interest, generate international interest or based on some international interest. Usually your research title should indicate the aim of your research and the keywords. The mere phrasing of the sentence should indicate what you want to do and should also elicit the keywords you intend to use in your main report. It is very important. Your research title also is expected to address neglected areas that have not been researched or that are not even researched into, areas of conflict where there are conflict of outcomes and the debate is heated up with different outcomes, some contestable, some not contestable, different outcomes from the research. So you want to contribute to that debate, or an entirely new area. Again, your choice of title must have cognizance to dependent variables and the independent variable. The dependent variable is a variable of importance. That is the outcome. It's like the outcome of what you're expecting. It's a variable of independence. Like if you say the effect of location on rental value, you expect that location influences rental value. That is basic. You already know, maybe theoretically, that location will affect rental value. So location is your independent variable, while location is your independent variable, while the other one is your dependent variable. You depend on the rental value. It is location that will determine what the rental value will be. That's what you are trying to say. Location is a very important factor in determining what the rental value or capital value of the property will be. So the dependent variable is the rental value or capital value of the property. Independent is the location. Of course, you can break that into several factors: accessibility, ease of movement, and so on, traffic and all that. How that will influence your rental or capital value. So something like that you must have two variables, one dependent and the other one independent. Otherwise, it will not make sense at all, or it will not show that you intend to carry out some actions to be able to find a problem or define a problem or deal with a problem that is already existing. The researcher also must show originality. He must not plagiarize. It is not just enough to copy a topic from somewhere and just apply it to your own. You must show distinct ability, and that distinct ability means that even though the title has been dealt with before, you should try to show originality by changing the setting or the environment, and that changes a lot of things if you do that. So you don't just, because if you just take the topic and deal with it like that, you will end up plagiarizing. You will end up copying what the original researcher has already done, and that will not be good for your research. In fact, it's a criminal offense to plagiarize. So show originality in areas that have not been dealt with before or in new areas. Very important. Very, very important. Then, whatever your title is, either building theory in one way or another, or testing theories, or you're trying to spot a gap, or you're trying to refute previous theories by problematization. Problematization means you are not simply gap spotting. You want to refute some theories. You want to expand some theories. You want to show the previous researchers in that area that you know better, so to speak, that you know better, or that you are more current in your findings. That is problematization. Then you choose a research title where data is available. If data is not available, means you cannot collect the data. If you cannot collect the data, then you cannot do the work. That's what it simply means, because research is based on data collection and synthesis of those data to be able to get reliable, dependable outcome or dependable research output. Your research also, in most cases, is about problem solving. I think I said that in the last module. So your title also must reflect the research problem. Must show that there's a problem and you're trying to solve it, either comparative problem, you're trying to compare, or you are trying to, if not comparing now, you are trying to reach a decision. There are problems in one form or another, so your research your title must reflect the problem. Comparative analysis of, so maybe there has not been any comparative analysis in that area, and you are trying to bring it up by comparing two variables, to come out with something new, or an expansion of an old output, and so on. So basically, your title must provide new information, and document, or you may also wish to document existing information. You may have some existing information that are not documented, so you can research into it with the aim of documenting it, putting it in a research form that people can make reference to. But try to avoid saturated areas where that have been over-researched by previous researchers. So you may end up just repeating yourselves. The researchers may be repeating themselves by delving into saturated areas. You must be mindful also of completion time, because every research work, since you are students, you have a time frame, and you must complete your research before that time frame, or you take an extension of maybe one or more semesters, which may not be good for you at the end of the day. So you must have knowledge about the area of your research. I keep harping on that because it's very, very essential. You must have knowledge, otherwise you won't be able to progress. You start from the known to the unknown. So you must know a significant part of what you are going to do. And you add more by trying to get information and synthesizing those information. Then your title must avoid abbreviations. Don't use abbreviation, VOAC or UNO. Put it in full, United Nations Organization or British Overseas Airways Corporation. So long as you are writing a research title, there must be no abbreviations. And you must also simulate readers' interest with your title. It must be attractive, as I said in the first one there. It must be catchy, carefully worded, and should tell a story in a way that will stimulate people who like to read it and make comments, and both parties will be happy, both the leadership and the researcher will be happy. So these are the very salient points you should not lose sight of in choosing your title, because I know that sooner or late you might be called upon to choose your title. These are the major points you have to consider. And students often find it difficult to choose their title because they don't have the benefit of this information that they are required to make use of in choosing their title. Yeah, the research is a process. It is a process because it is cyclic. It moves around in cycle. Now I'll take you through a number of related steps. First one being defining the problem. You must define the research problem. You have to collect data after defining the problem, analyze the data, and report the results. These are major steps in the research cycle. Now, defining the problem. In defining the problem, you have to formulate the problem. Look at your surroundings, look at what is going around, look at your area of interest, look at all those things, and be able to bring out a problem that maybe previous researchers have alerted in their future, in their definition of future research, areas of future research which they have noted, or problems that they have highlighted in their work, but they did not deal with them. So these are areas one should look at to formulate a problem, and that problem must be a realistic one and applicable in that moment in time, at that moment in time. So because formulation of research problem is important, because that will lead you to your aim anyway. And we have said before that through the formulation of the research problem, a title can be attached to that work, because you must know the problem and your title must reflect your aim of research. And the aim of research is also twinkled with the problem. So it's not they are interwoven. From the research problem you get the aim of the research. From the aim of the research, you get the objectives. That is what you are going to do to be able to achieve those aims. And from the objectives, you will get the research questions as well, which are all formulated to be able to deal with the research problem and with the aim of your research, to achieve the aim of your research. So these are very important issues because they are interwoven. They all work together. You cannot break the chain. Research problem leads you to your research aim, because your aim must reflect the research problem, and your objectives must reflect the aim of the research, and you get your research questions from the objectives, so that when you find the answers to those research questions, your objectives can be fulfilled. Your aim and objectives can be fulfilled. So formulation of research problem is done in conjunction with the purpose of study, if you like to put it that way. Now, before you go into a research, you have to ask yourself, what is the specific problem that you want to solve or that you want to explain? And secondly, it is difficult to gather any data without a clear definition of your problem. If you cannot define your problem, then what information are you going to get? It does not give you a clue as to what information to collect. 2, collecting information. Collecting information means that we have to define a population, about which you are seeking to make inference. All the requirements of samplings, if it's an experimental work, sampling and experimental design must be met. And you must design it in a way that you can collect the data. That's called research design. We may get to that thereafter. It is important for your statistical analysis. Otherwise, it is difficult. We live and work in a time when data collection and statistical computation and statistics have become easy, almost to the point of triviality. Paradoxically, the design of data collection is never sufficiently analyzed in many textbooks, but it is very important. One must start with emphasis on the importance of defining the population about which is seeking to make inferences. Then you must design ways to collect your data. As I've said before, it means you must define a population, which is a set of elements of interest in the study. You must define your sample, a subset of the population, and to be able to make your statistical inference, which will help you to extend the knowledge obtained from a random sample from a population to the whole population, that is, from which you can generalize. The data collected should then go through 3 main stages. You want to code the data. You type it, maybe you type it first, then you code it, or code it and then type, whichever is convenient. And edit. Coding, the data is transferred, if necessary, to coded sheets. Coding means you want to assign numbers to them such that you can recognize them. You can recognize the data using a coding system. Typing, after coding, you now type. The data is typed and stored by at least 2 independent data entry persons. Why 2? 2 because to check the mistakes. If you are entering independently 2 people, you are likely to discover the mistakes quickly, or there are likely to be fewer mistakes or no mistakes at all. So that is the idea behind it. Editing, then you check the data again by comparing the 2 independent type data. Mismatches can then be easily observed and verified.
Data coding
So
is also essential.
you have to when you come back from site with your data from the site, you have to code the data according to how you want to measure. We will come to measurement later. According to how you want to measure your information. Then you type it and edit it, check it. So if there are outliers, you remove them. Then if there are also missing values, you have to treat them appropriately. I hope we get to that maybe later.
Data screening is also important. Data screening.
Outliers very important because they distort the figures and the compilation of the figures. You get some figures that are extremely high or that are not practicable. So you have to remove them. Could have been typed, could have been typographical error, or maybe the respondent made some mistakes. Then the third of the processes is the analysis of data. Statistical you have to analyze. When you get the data, you have to, when you carry out these steps of coding, typing and editing after you have collected the data, then you have to analyze the data. So in your analysis, there are two methods of analysis, either the descriptive or the inferential. The descriptive you call exploratory. What tells you that exploratory descriptive method tells you what the data seems to be saying, whereas the confirmatory, as the name suggests, or inferential, tells you what the data is saying within some probability limits. So exploratory data descriptive method. For that, you use simple arithmetic, mean, median, mode, graphs, pictures, and so on. These are just illustrating what the data seem to be saying, and this you can see from the graph easily. You can see from your bar chart, pie chart, or whatever chart you have drawn. Before I go further, please let me say one or two things more. The type of errors you are likely to encounter can be recording errors. You may have recorded wrongly from the field. Typing error, your typist may have typed nonsense there, or typed whatever she liked. In some cases, it does happen. Transcription errors, that is, you may have copied wrongly, or the typist may have copied wrongly. Inversion errors, she may have taken 123.45 to be 123.54. These errors are common. Nobody is above making these mistakes. Then repetition errors. He may have repeated some data which occurred only once, and he has typed it twice, or she has typed it twice. An error can be deliberate too. People who are working from answers to questions can make deliberate errors. But that's a misconduct. Anyway, that's a research misconduct. The fourth in the cycle is analysis of the data. I think we have talked about that. Reporting the results. Through inferences, an estimate or test claims about the characteristic of a population can be obtained from a sample. Through inferences, what you are trying to infer is that your test statistic will be the same or not too far away from the population statistic or from the population parameter. That's what you are trying to infer, and you think that you can generalize this. So whatever you get from the sample, from your sample estimate, can be generalized, taken to the population estimate, taken to be the same with the population estimate. Then you introduce the probability theory. And what does the probability theory do? Because of your randomizing of sampling, it analyzes the uncertainties. It analyzes the uncertainties associated with future events. Because you are now recording the fact that you are uncertain whether there will be coincidence of random sampling or other errors, so that you are uncertain. But this probability theory helps you to analyze these uncertainties. And the major uncertainties are in type 1 and 2 errors, which we will discuss later. So it is the probability theory that helps you to analyze and give you a more correct, workable but this probability theory
and reliable results.
they are based on the probability theory, because if you have done the random sampling, means your sampling is probabilistic, then you'll be expected to go further from descriptive method, which seems to be saying something, to the inferential method, which has actually said something. So what the inferential method says is what is more important, because it's subjected to probability, and that is likely to give you a more dependable result than just using your sample data. Remember, your sample data is just part of the population. It's just taken from part of the population. So you are assuming that whatever you get from the sample data is applicable to the entire population. This may not be right all the time, and descriptive data just tells you that this sample data is equal to population data. The information from sample data is equal to, which may not be right anyway, because you just selected parts, not the entire population. So there may be coincidence of random sampling, and maybe sampling errors and so on. So that's why it's necessary to go further to confirmatory, so that I'll be able to confirm based on probability and the errors that are adjusted for. Yes, we must go back to study aims and objectives. Although we discussed it randomly before, but we have to go back to, because both of them are pivots of a good research. You must have a well-specified aim, which also indicates, which is subscripted into your title, and aims and objectives are also to achieve, or objectives are also to achieve your aim. So what's a study aim? Is the goal that the researcher is set to achieve. For instance, he seeks to find solution to a stated research problem. You can see the relationship to research problem there, or a relationship that exists between the problem and other problems. So you're still talking about problem. Problem gives you an idea of what your title should be, and your title also should indicate what your aim will be. It should show your aim. So project title also indicates the aim, as we have said before, because it establishes a link with the problem. So we must understand this link is unbreakable in any research. The aim is linked to the objectives, it's linked to the title is linked to the aim, and it's linked to the objective. They are all linked to the research problem. We must understand this. This is very basic. Then study objectives or purposes. They are the modes when you set out the aim. How do we intend to achieve this aim? For attainment of you set out the modes and strategies for the attainment of the goal. And these aims and strategies are based on the stated problem, as we have discussed before. The objective could be to find relationship, to test a model, to determine critical factors, to analyze, and so on and so forth. But we must endeavor to use high-level verbs at a higher level, but at a lower level, anything can still go. To determine, to test is okay. All objectives must be investigated in a study. In any study that you are undertaking, all your objectives must be investigated. So I advise that 2 or 3 objectives are just enough. We just do. Don't take too many objectives, because you have to investigate all of them in your study, and also find methods for all of them, and show results for all of them, discuss all of them. So that will be plenty of work for a student who has a limited period of time. So I suggest 2 to 3, at most 4. Objectives must be sequential. These objectives, when you have brought them out, mostly from the literature, from your literature study, you should know what the objectives should be. These objectives must be arranged in a sequential form, and they must match your results and discussion, because you discuss your results and discussion according to your objectives, one after the other. Research questions and hypotheses are also derived from objectives, because when you set out your objectives, that is when you can have your research questions and formulate your hypothesis and all that. So objective is very important. If a study has no objective, it's no study at all. It must have at least 1 objective, and at most 5. At any level, 5 is just okay, but at lower levels than probably the PhD, 2 or 3 will be okay, and you must do justice to all these objectives. Thank you very much.